So Mike Vrabel's gone, but he's not the only one. Derrick Henry gave a farewell address after absolutely decimating the Jacksonville Jaguars, eliminating them from the playoffs. He's on the older side for running backs, but we know he's a genetic freak. We know this guy can plow through a brick wall. So any team would be lucky to have him. Who knows how long his prime is? Who knows how long he's going to be able to sustain this level? We saw a little bit of injury concerns here in the last couple years. Kyle, now that Derrick Henry's presumably just going to be out there for anyone, what do you think? What do you think about his next phase and next step in the NFL?
Well, I'm surprised that the Titans don't want to keep him around till the wheels fall off, just because he is the greatest player in that franchise's history. And I'm not talking about the Houston Oilers days. They don't get to keep the Houston Oilers, but in the 25 years of Tennessee Titans football, he's the best player in their franchise's history. He's one of like two running backs in the last decade who's going to get inducted into the Hall of Fame. And Derrick Henry, I'm surprised that they weren't just going to keep him till the wheels fell off, but I guess everyone else got fired, and so they decided to just clean house and start over again with a new general manager in Rand Carthon. So they've already done the franchise tag. They're just going to let him walk, and he can go to pretty much anywhere he wants, which I guess is exciting for Derrick Henry. You get to potentially cash out one more time on a big contract. But what's interesting is that we talked about the idea of doing this video, and I just was going through the teams, and I'm just struggling to find the perfect fit for Derrick Henry, other than just like him going to a rebuilding team and just eating, his 1,300 yards while the team goes 5-12 or something like that. I really haven't found the spot that I think would work great for Derrick Henry going forward, but it's exciting for him that he gets to have the free agency space. The one that I
Yeah.
landed on, and does he want to be a little petty? Because I think the Houston Texans would be the perfect place for him to go
Ah,
if he wanted to
you
sign
stole
somewhere
mine.
and stay in the AFC South. Yeah, it's too good, man. The
Yeah.
Texans have a strong offensive line. They obviously made these huge leaps on offense. They're working with Devin Singletary right now. That's the one that makes sense to me. The other one is like maybe the Vikings, but
Yeah.
the Texans make a lot of sense.
Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit. I will just throw in, of course, we know Baltimore tried to pursue him in a trade this past season. Add their name in the list is just a team to monitor. But yeah, the Houston Texans, they just have a ton of cap space this coming off season. We look at their running game right now. Devin Singletary, not really doing it. Damian Pierce, not really doing it. Yeah, and Derrick Henry there, a guy who knows the division. I mean, I mentioned it at the start of the video. It seems like every time the Titans played the Jacksonville Jaguars in recent years, Derrick Henry was right there running for 150 yards, 2 touchdowns on them. So, given if I'm the Houston Texans, who's going to be my biggest competition for the next few years as far as winning this division on a yearly basis? It's probably Jacksonville. So, I want the guy who absolutely owns Jacksonville to be on my team, especially when I don't really have an established run game. Now, there's some drawbacks to Derrick Henry. It's not just I insert Derrick Henry and I'm just getting a superstar stud. You do have to also consider he's not necessarily a 3-down running back. And what I mean by that is he's not involved in the passing game as much as a lot of other running backs. So you do have to almost supplement him in that way. But if you are a team that likes to establish an early lead and just pound the rock, obviously he's a perfect guy to add onto your roster. So yeah, I think Houston is a logical fit. It gives CJ Stroud another weapon. But what about like a team like Baltimore? Again, like I don't know how cap space is going to be an issue for them moving forward, but we know they were a team that was most interested in getting him this past season.
Oh man, that would be so unfair. That would be so unfair if Derrick Henry ended up on Baltimore, which granted, it's not the same Derrick Henry that it was 2 years ago. So it's not like, oh my God, they just discovered the cheat code. But man, that I hadn't even thought about that because I remember they were trying to trade for Derrick Henry. Like there were whispers around that. But man, Baltimore would actually be a great choice. I know that Gus Edwards has been very good and they're still, hoping that J.K. Dobbins post
Yeah.
second major knee injury will have something left in the tank, but man, Baltimore's a good option. I mean, they're the number one seed, so obviously they're a good option.
I mean, I feel as though they don't need him because, as you mentioned, Gus Edwards gives them what they want from that power back, goal line back perspective. And assumedly, if like J.K. Dobbins comes back to them next year, after his most recent injury. They've been able to get the most out of guys like Justice Hill, Kevon Mitchell, came in for a few games before he tore his ACL and was pretty exciting too. A good little slasher back for them. So they don't necessarily need it because they seem like they have a good committee there. And obviously we know that Lamar got paid. So they do have to get a little bit more creative with how they use their money, because Derrick Henry, wherever he goes, he's not going to take a discount necessarily just because he's on the older side, because he's still running well. If he was running poorly, if this was like a plodding 3 yards a carry Derrick Henry, then I would say, okay, you might be able to get him on like a $7-8 million deal, but I think he's still going to demand somewhere in the double-digit millions, as far as like his next contract on a per year basis. So, other teams, again, if I mentioned cap issues for Baltimore, I also have to say the same about Buffalo, even though I love Buffalo as the best option, I think, because I think he's just a logical fit over there. When I think about like a guy, Derrick Henry size, build, I think cold weather. I think a guy that's just going to just put people into the snow, just plant their face into like a foot of snow. And I think Derrick Henry could be that guy if he went to a place like Buffalo. Whether it's Buffalo or Baltimore, you have athletic quarterbacks that can move, which always tends to aid the running game. So I think that he would make a lot of sense there if they can make it work within their cap. You mentioned Minnesota earlier. Minnesota makes a lot of sense, but it depends what Minnesota wants to do, because Minnesota needs a running back. Let's just put it out there right away. Minnesota needs a running back in order to balance out their offense a little bit. Minnesota needs to get that ground game going. They're in a situation where they just don't even know who their next quarterback is. Are they going to bring in Kirk Cousins again? Are they going to go rookie quarterback? Which, again, if you mentioned Derrick Henry going to like a rebuilding team, a team in the middle of a rebuild, I guess Minnesota does make sense from that perspective. But I imagine Derrick Henry at this point in his career wants to go to a team in which he has a chance to win a championship. I hope that he doesn't take the JJ Watt route and just go to like a Arizona, right, and just take the highest contract he can. But it happens more often than not. Money talks, bullshit walks sometimes, and sometimes that's more of a priority for players than actual rings. Minnesota, while they might be willing to pay him more or so, I don't think that they're the best fit for his career or his legacy, I should say. Legacy building mode we are for Derrick Henry at this point.
Yeah, I think it's probably a combination of the two. Like maybe he won't take the biggest offer on the table like JJ Watt did, or maybe a rebuilding team won't offer the biggest contract on the table for Derrick Henry, but it would be cool to see him play for one of these playoff contending teams.
I just remembered like a team I was thinking about. What do you think of this? And I hate this, first off. Let me say this, but Dallas. What has Dallas's biggest issue been this year, right? Short yardage, goal line situations. Tony Pollard just not able to get it done. Like they needed a little bit of that thunder and lightning between him and Zeke. And without Zeke there, we're starting to see the limitations of Tony Pollard. I don't know if Pollard would be back next year if the Cowboys were to make this move, but I would add that I think that they can always find another Tony Pollard. If they got Derrick Henry, I think that would make their offense very balanced, very scary. What do you think of Dallas?
If the problem for Dallas, okay, so Dallas has some money to work with. I should mention that. And Dallas also has the highest percentage of yards of offense by any single player this year, which is CeeDee Lamb. So, but if the problem for Dallas is that you just need a goal line back, and granted, Tony Pollard is a free agent at the end of the year. They did franchise tag him last year and haven't signed him to an extension, so they can get off of that money. So they have money to work with. But if the issue is not Tony Pollard and the issue is just a goal line back, go get, what is it, leader of the Hidden Village of the Dead, Jamal Williams over there with the Saints. Just go get a goal line back. Like, that's kind of the thinking around that. But if you want to just swap out Pollard for Derrick Henry because Henry gives you more versatility, sure, I guess you could understand that logic behind it. But the same thing with Buffalo. Like, I know I've been saying for years, Buffalo's running game just can never get it right. Just they've never been able to figure out the running game unless it's just Josh Allen plowing forward and running dudes over. But they actually now are starting to figure out the run game with James Cook. Like, it actually looks pretty good. So I don't know if I want to just completely blow it up when all they probably really need is like not Leonard Fournette as their backup running back. Just draft a 3rd round or 4th round running back, plug them in and see what you can get. But it's just kind of the idea. You don't need to blow up your running back room for Derrick Henry if you have a good thing going.
Well, let me throw out another team too, because this team has a lot of assets coming into this draft. A lot of cap space to work with a rookie quarterback coming in. What about Chicago? Chicago's coming in. They don't have really a defined running back at this point. I know they use a little bit of combination of Dante Foreman, Khalil Herbert, Rashawn Johnson out of Texas, Hookem. But other than that, like, those are all nice backs in their own right, but obviously nowhere near the talent that Derrick Henry is. You have a rookie quarterback coming in. You want to protect them. You want to give them weapons, no matter if it's Caleb Williams or let's say even they pull a wild card and decide to stay with Justin Fields. The Chicago Bears just need more offensive talent to work with because they decided today that they're going to keep Matt Eberflus as their head coach moving forward. Matt Eberflus, he seems like a guy that I imagine wants to run. Give me a good defense. Give me a good running game. We can figure out the passer as we go. But if I have those two components working, we could win a lot of football games. And the Chicago Bears, to their credit, this back half of the season have started to win football games. Give me a guy that's, again, just going to put people's faces in the dirt like Derrick Henry. And I think that might aid them in winning a few more ball games next year. What do you think of Chicago?
Earlier, we were talking about Derrick Henry wanting to, have a swan song part of his career and help his legacy and stuff like that. I don't think going to Chicago is the right way to go because 4 games into running on that mucky field that they have in Chicago, he is going to rip up his knee and it's going to be over for Derrick Henry. I would not wish any running back to have to play on that godforsaken, terrible sod field that they have in Chicago. Drive this long, why don't we just make it more of a challenge for him by going to the muck it up sog field of Chicago?
I know, but just again, given the other factors I'm saying, if you're Chicago and if you just obviously decide again to move off of Justin Fields, then Caleb Williams, you're hoping that he's the real deal. If Caleb Williams comes in and he is the real deal, add in Derrick Henry, DJ Moore, this offense is starting to come together a little bit, starting to look a little bit nicer. Like you don't think that that's a team that maybe could be a little bit competitive, especially in the NFC North, that I'm not going to say is like completely just locking the Lions for the next 10 years.
Obviously, bringing in Derrick Henry will make the Chicago Bears better. I don't know if it's like the piece that they're missing to get over the hump or whatever you think Chicago is missing, but they will be a better football team with Derrick Henry than they will be without him. That's why they'll be paying the $10 to $13 million a year in order to sign Derrick Henry. They will obviously be better with Derrick Henry. And by the way, they've actually been investing in the offensive line. So it's not like the Bears teams of Justin Fields' rookie year where they couldn't just block anyone to save their lives. They actually do have a halfway decent offensive line this year.
Okay, and another team, I'm just going to throw this one out there, the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, I know that they had some resistance to paying Austin Eckler this past year, but as it proved, that was probably the right move by them because Austin Eckler did not look like his prime self this past season. Derrick Henry, obviously similar comp to Austin Eckler in the sense of age range and how much they're going to get paid. But when I think about what is missing in this Chargers offense, the fact that they haven't really had like a pounder, a solid running back, on the early downs has just been something that I think that Justin Herbert could benefit from even more than Austin Eckler. And again, I'm not going to diminish Austin Eckler as a good running back, but we know what his skill set is. And I think that his skill set may not necessarily be the best for Justin Herbert because they already got pass catchers all across the field, right? Give me at least one power running back like Derrick Henry, and I think that this offense could really move. Jim Harbaugh, he's going to want the power running back because that's exactly what Jim Harbaugh likes to do. And heck, maybe you sign Derrick Henry, maybe you sign Blake Corum this year, complement them off of each other. I think that that's a scary offense right there if that's what the future of the Los Angeles Chargers is.
I would laugh so hard if the Chargers, who currently have the 32nd most cap space in the NFL of any team right now, if the Chargers use their very limited cap space that they can create by like converting some contracts to base salaries and paying it up front, if they then took that limited cap space and gave it to Derrick Henry to replace Austin Eckler, who is obviously a bit injured, but heading into his 30s. So you could argue maybe Eckler is at the back end of his success. And you just articulated great points about why you would make the switch from Eckler to Henry. But if they did that while having the worst passing defense in the NFL and chose to go that route over going for a corner, oh my God, that would be hilarious. I would love it if the Chargers
Well,
did something dumb like
here's the
that.
thing. Like, how many like high profile free agent corners are really going to be out there on the open market this year that the Chargers are really going to go pursue? They could probably draft one. And here's the other thing I would also add to that. We noticed in the last few weeks that their defense does have talent. It just might have been being used incorrectly by defensive genius Brandon Staley. So I know that Harbaugh, I think, is going to use the defensive talent on that team a little bit better. And maybe they might not jump from worst to first as far as like their defense next year. But if you told me they come back towards the middle of the pack next year and aren't such an albatross on this team going into next year, that might fix itself just by making a switch at head coach.
I agree with that. I think that Brandon Staley obviously was not getting very much out of them. Their defense did improve even as they went 0-3 after Staley got fired to end the season, which in fairness, they got the 6th pick in the draft, or the 5th pick in the draft. I think that's a pretty fair trade-off, I'd say, at the end. To the point about Derrick Henry and the Chargers, I think it's like 5th on the list of teams. Like I wouldn't have thought the Chargers would be a fit in the Derrick Henry sweepstakes, but I guess they are kind of a revolving door right now. So maybe they'd flip up the running back room. Like we're looking at the Texans, both of us agree is the team that makes the most sense. Baltimore is one that you brought up that I think would be really interesting. Vikings, if he just wanted to take the biggest contract potentially, and the Vikings were tired of the revolving door of running backs that they've had. Dallas is a fine mention. Yeah. Like I would even pick those teams before I got down to the Chargers, but I think the Chargers would probably have to offer the most money. I don't really think Derrick Henry's taken a discount to try and run it back with the Chargers or something like that. The Chargers probably fall closer into the Vikings camp of like, I mean, yeah, the Chargers have the quarterback and they're going to have a coach probably better than Brandon Staley coming in the door, but that's like the Vikings one. It's like if you just want to take the money for the biggest offer, maybe you go there.
One quick note I would mention about the Vikings. It was also reported that Kirk Cousins might take a hometown discount, quote unquote, hometown discount there, which tells me maybe he's at the point where he's like, I've made enough money. If I could just supplement my team with more talent, I'm willing to do it. And if that's the case, then sure, the Vikings are interesting. Obviously, we're talking about a team that was a playoff team a year ago. Could have been a playoff team this year if Kirk Cousins didn't get hurt. They had issues with the running game. If they fix the running game, they have Justin Jefferson. Kirk Cousins is back healthy. The offensive line has been slowly improving over the years. And if Brian Flores sticks around to coach that defense again, the Vikings actually aren't that bad as far as like potential competitiveness added to who can offer me the best contract.
The Vikings can get back to 10-7. That's what they can. The Vikings can get 10-7.
Here's what I would say about that. They could get back to 10-7, but I feel as though I would like their 10-7 roster better than I would like their 13-win roster if Derrick Henry was over there.
Yeah, probably. But the Vikings just exist in this space where in every season of Kirk Cousins' career, they've won between 7 and 10 games, except for last year where they won 13, but we all knew that the 13 was fraudulent because they were just pulling these games out of their ass and going 10-0 in one-score games. Every other year Kirk Cousins has been there, it's 7 and 10 wins. That's what the Vikings exist for. The lowest end of their spectrum is 7. The highest end of their spectrum is 10. And that's kind of the space that the Vikings occupy at this point. So yeah, Derrick Henry on the Vikings would be great. It's all that money that they saved not paying Dalvin Cook. They can just pass along to Derrick Henry. And they just took 1 year to reset the salary cap space. They're in a unique position to offer Derrick Henry the most money of any of these teams that we mentioned, other than the Bears, because the Bears do have a ton of cap space. So we'll see what ends up happening with those choices. But the Vikings are in a super position to offer the most money of any team in the Derrick Henry sweepstakes.
All right, guys. Well, Derrick Henry, he's going to be out there. A lot of teams are going to be interested. Which team do you think ends up bringing in the former 2,000-yard rusher? I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on all our social medias from Juju and Kyle. Stay safe, happy, and healthy. We'll see you next time.